By the time security pulled her out of the line, Amara had already done 3 readings that morning and was tired of people pretending they did not want what they obviously came for. She always laughed about that part in her head. In public, people said they didn't believe in tarot, didn't believe in ancestors, didn't believe in signs. Then they sat down at her table, lowered their voice, and asked if their mother was proud of them, or if this year would finally stop hurting. Airports were her favorite hunting ground for that kind of honesty, not because she worked inside them, because she existed in the border around them. On most days, Amara was a working reader in a small storefront on the east side of the city, squeezed between a laundromat and a pawn shop. She shared the space with a nail tech and an herbalist. The rent was cheap, the neighbors loud, and the floor always a little bit sticky no matter how often she mopped. People came in for love, money, court cases, the usual. On some days, when the money dipped and the landlord's patience shrank, she took her cards out into the world, conferences, street fairs, hotel lobbies when management looked the other way. Once a month, when the flights at Port Camden ran particularly full, she hired a rideshare, packed her deck and a plain laptop sleeve filled with candles and flyers, and set up at the airport's public drop-off zone outside the security perimeter. Strictly speaking, she was not supposed to be there. There were rules about solicitation. There were rules about everything. But she never blocked doors, never shouted, never held a sign. She sat on a plain folding stool between the rideshare pickup lane and the smoking area, cards in her hands, small sign at her feet that read simply, Tarot, Donations. In an airport, everyone was already thinking about timing, luck, and outcomes. Her work, in that environment, did not feel like intrusion. It felt like translation. That morning, the air around Port Camden carried jet fuel and rain. Flights had been delayed. People were restless in the particular way only airport people could be, trapped, but trying to look important about it. In the first hour, she read for a college kid terrified about moving abroad, a man going to apologize to someone he had not seen in 10 years, and a woman who pretended she was just killing time, but clutched the card about burnout like it was a boarding pass. Each reading settled something inside her. It always did. Not the future. She had learned the hard way not to pretend she controlled that. But the present. She watched shoulders drop, jaws unclench, eyes go a little softer. The cards were a language they did not know they spoke until she translated the shapes and stories for them. She was packing up when the first officer stopped. He was airport police, not TSA. Dark navy uniform, sidearm, the posture of someone for whom every space belonged to him until specifically told otherwise. He did not approach like a person seeing another worker. He approached like a man spotting something that offended his sense of what was supposed to be in front of this building, and what was not. Amara felt his attention before she looked up. It had a weight. He asked for her ID. She gave it. He asked what she was doing. She explained in her calm voice that she was offering tarot readings for donations only, not charging fixed fees, not blocking any official walkway, and that she moved whenever staff requested. He did not seem interested in the details. He asked how much she made, not as part of any official form. Just with a tight smile that suggested he already had a story in his head about what kind of person sat outside an airport with cards and a tip jar. She noticed the way his gaze slid past the college kid who had just handed her cash, with hands still shaking from a phone call home. She noticed that the smokers 20 feet away, two white men loudly complaining about flight delays, were not asked what they were up to. It might have ended there. A warning, an instruction to leave. What changed the scene was the second officer. He joined the first with an energy that felt like someone walking into a group chat, already mid-joke. He glanced at the cards, at her sign, at her skin, and his face shifted into that smirk people get when they think they have found an easy punchline. In his voice, the word tarot acquired quotes. So did the word reader. He described her, not to her, but to his colleague, like a scam they had all seen before. All-knowing brand of cynicism, fake psychic, con artist, taking advantage of desperate travelers. He wondered out loud, loud enough for her to hear, how many suckers had paid her today. For a moment, she just listened, cataloging each word, letting them stack alongside other words, collected over a lifetime. Fortune teller, witch, fraud, gypsy, the wrong word, thrown at the wrong people, still carrying the same venom. Then came the part that slid under her ribs. He said they saw people like her all the time. People who made up stories and called it spiritual guidance. People who took cash from folks in crisis. He said more, casually, that they would see her face on their internal bulletins soon enough if she kept it up. A scammer, in other words. The language was familiar and old. Her grandmother had heard it from landlords when she rented a room for readings in the 70s. Her mother had heard it from church ladies who despised her cards, but called her secretly when a son got locked up. It always boiled down to the same accusation. If a black woman made money with anything that looked like insight, especially with something invisible, it must be a trick. Amara had ways of handling this. Humor, most days. Patience, when she could afford it. Packing her things and leaving when she could not. Today, none of those felt sufficient. The week before, something had changed in her life, too. She had just flown back from a conference, the first real one she had ever been invited to, not as a reader in the lobby, but as a paid speaker. It was called the Synchronicity Summit, a curious mix of mental health professionals, tech founders, and people in the hazy line between spiritual work and coaching. Someone had seen her videos online, short clips where she laid out 3 cards and spoke plainly about grief, debt, staying alive long enough to outgrow your worst season. The videos had gone quietly viral among people who worked nights and people who worked too much. A panel organizer reached out. They wanted someone who could talk about the overlap between intuition, pattern recognition, and the way humans search for meaning when the world is on fire. They wanted a black woman who actually made a living in that space, not a wellness influencer, whose greatest hardship had been losing followers. The conference had gone better than she dared imagine. She had sat on a stage between a neuroscientist and a UX architect and talked about how tarot spreads train the brain to see complexity instead of simple yes-no answers, how poor communities used any available tools to forecast risk, how 6 of swords meant something different when your rent was 3 months overdue. The crowd listened. Afterward, a line of people formed, not for readings, but to say that what she'd described sounded like their own coping mechanisms, just with different names. There had been cameras there too, branded ones, live stream rigs on tripods, recording every session for a partnership with a travel media company. The summit had cut a deal with an airline and an airport network that streamed short slices of long talks on the muted screens you saw while waiting to board. She had signed the media release with hands that shook, thinking nothing would come of it. Nobody put a tarot reader on an airport screen, except, apparently, the world had changed more than she realized. Standing there on the curb, listening to uniformed men call her a scammer, she had no idea that the airport's digital signage system was in the middle of synchronizing its weekly content update. The officers, it appeared, did not know either. They did not know that inside the terminal, just beyond the sliding glass doors, technicians had just pushed a bundle of new short-form clips into the system. They did not know that the travel company's campaign this month centered around unexpected guides, people who helped travelers navigate more than just terminals. A meditation teacher in Tokyo, a grief counselor in Chicago, a community organizer in Lagos, and, in one segment, a tarot reader from the east side of a mid-sized American city who talked about fear and departure gates. They did not know that the thumbnail chosen as her title card was a close-up of her face, headscarf, and all, framed by a caption across the bottom in white sans serif. Amara Cole, tarot reader, finding meaning between flights. What she knew, in that moment on the curb, was that she was tired. She stood there in her plain clothes, laptop sleeve bumping her thigh, listening to men with state-issued guns laugh about psychic scams and foreign hustlers. She could feel people in line turning their heads, trying not to make eye contact, absorbing the message. Here is someone you should not trust, someone you should not tip, someone whose presence makes the airport less safe. Later, when she replayed the scene in her head, she realized she had not raised her voice. She had not tried to lecture them. She had simply done what her grandmother trained her to do in every unfair conversation: speak facts, not rage, even when rage sat in her throat like a stone. She told them, slowly, that she was a licensed business owner, that her income was taxed, that she offered readings for whatever people wished to donate, and that she moved whenever airport staff asked. She mentioned the conference, the invitation, the travel partnership, not as a boast, but as proof that not everyone with authority saw her as a parasite. They did not care. They waved a hand at her words like swatting smoke. They told her to pack up and leave. One of them suggested that if she wanted to act like a fortune teller, she should have seen this coming. The line laughed. Not everyone. Enough. She packed slowly, fingers stiff. She slid the cards back into their wrap, tucked the small donation jar into her bag. Every muscle ached from the effort of not shaking. With each movement, she could feel the cameras overhead tracking her. Later, the officers would probably use that footage as another punchline, another story. The psychic we shut down at the curb. Inside the terminal, the screens finished their reset. The first passengers noticed it at the gate for a delayed flight to Denver. The ads that had looped all morning, credit cards, luggage, generic landscapes, blinked out for a moment. Then they returned, intercut with short, muted clips that had a different feel. People talking directly to camera with subtitles below. A title sequence reading, "Unexpected Guides." At Gate 12, two teens scrolling their phones looked up by chance and froze. On the screen above the boarding desk, without sound, a familiar face appeared. A black woman in a headscarf, in a different outfit than she wore now, sitting in a well-lit chair with a simple deck of cards on a table in front of her. The caption at the bottom named her Amara Cole, Tarot Reader. She talked about how airports made people confront decisions they had delayed for years. The subtitles relayed her words, how the same card meant comfort for one traveler and warning for another, how fear in a departure lounge was louder than any jet engine. Behind her, blurred, travelers moved. On some screens, the clip played with the travel company's logo. On others, with the airport's own branding as part of a Wellness on the Go series. In the central atrium, a ring of screens suspended above the food court began running the same segment in rotation. Her face, her voice in text, her title. Outside, the officers watched her collapse her folding stool and tuck it under her arm. A shift happened in the air before she understood why. It started with phones. People who had walked past her earlier now glanced toward the sliding doors, then toward their notifications. Airport apps, travel feeds, the summit's social media push, all of them had coordinated to blast out the day's featured clip. Travelers inside began to connect the woman they saw on their screens with the woman being escorted away from the curb. Recognition traveled faster than luggage. Someone filmed from just inside the glass as Amara walked away. Not a long video, only a few seconds. A black woman with a small sign under her arm, 2 airport cops behind her, her face set in that tight mask used by people who refuse to cry in public. In the reflection of the door, if you looked closely, you could see another version of her face running silently on a screen over the security line. The caption one viewer added when they later posted the clip online was simple. Airport has her on every screen as unexpected guide, while their cops kick her out as a scammer. In the moment, though, none of that virality existed yet. What existed were whispers. A gate agent stepped outside on a short break, phone still in hand, and saw her. He had just watched her segment twice while waiting for a late plane to board. He glanced from his screen to the real woman, to the officers, back to the screen. Something inside him nodded. A supervisor in an office upstairs received a text from his wife saying she loved the new airport guide campaign, especially the tarot reader one. He had not known they were running it today. He looked at the internal content schedule, saw her name, then saw the location tag on a recent security note. Unlicensed tarot activity at curb, subject removed by officers. Pieces clicked together in his head in the wrong order, then rearranged themselves in the right one. If the airport was broadcasting a black tarot reader as part of its brand, and at the same time treating a black tarot reader at the curb as a nuisance or threat, that was not just ironic. It was combustible. He called the duty manager. The duty manager called the head of airport police. Within minutes, the officers behind Amara had radios buzzing on their shoulders and supervisors asking questions in tones just a little too sharp to ignore. Who is she? What exactly did she do? Did she refuse to leave? Did she threaten anyone? Did she block access? Did anyone complain? Without realizing it, the officers found themselves recounting actions that sounded less like scam and more like woman sitting quietly with cards and a jar. When the duty manager finally reached her at the edge of the parking structure, Amara felt like she had run a race without moving. He was out of breath, as if he had actually sprinted, though the distance from his office to the curb was mostly elevator and walkway. He introduced himself, asked her calmly to explain her side. He listened to words that had landed like feathers on the officers' uniforms and slid off. On him, they seemed to catch. He told her that the airport had entered into a content partnership after an international conference, that one of the featured segments was hers. He said that when staff realized the woman on screen and the woman being removed outside were the same person, people upstairs became suddenly very interested in whether policy had been applied fairly. For a long second, she just stared at him, absorbing the absurdity. They did not respect the work in front of them until a camera packaged it in corporate colors and distributed it across their screens. She did not say that out loud. There was too much truth in it, and truth like that tended to close doors instead of open them. What happened next did not feel like justice. Justice would have been an apology with weight behind it, a change of culture so deep it shifted who got stopped in the first place. What happened was damage control. The airport could not afford the story that was already brewing. Their logo in the corner of a video praising a black tarot reader, while their cops treated her like a petty criminal outside. The travel company couldn't afford the optics either. Within hours, they were on the phone with each other and with her. Lawyers became involved. Statements were drafted. The words miscommunication and overly rigid enforcement were used a lot. But in the middle of the corporate scramble, something else took shape. The travel company pitched a follow-up segment, not just unexpected guides, but a short series on travel while black, about profiling, suspicion, and the ways security culture landed harder on some bodies than others. They wanted her, not just as a talking head this time, but as a central figure, walking through the same terminal that had just pushed her out, explaining what it felt like to be seen as insight on a screen and as a problem on the floor. She agreed, carefully, with conditions. The new segment had to include other voices: a black flight attendant, a Muslim traveler with too many stories of extra screenings, a janitor who had watched, who got stopped at random, and who did not. She would not stand alone as the symbolic face of suffering. She wanted a chorus. The airport, hungry for a chance to spin their internal crisis into a narrative of growth, cooperated. Weeks later, she walked through Port Camden again, this time with a small production crew in tow. No folding stool, no donation jar. Just her, in a clean blazer over a simple dress, cards tucked into a side pocket like a secret talisman. The officers saw her, the same two who had called her a scammer, and pretended not to. The camera saw her too, lenses adjusting as she passed. She spoke into one of them about fear and travel, about how it felt to be read as threat before she even opened her mouth. They filmed at dawn, at midday, late at night. They filmed in front of the very doors where she had once packed up her cards under watchful eyes. She poured all the fury and grace she had into sentences about pattern recognition, about who gets the benefit of doubt and who gets treated like a walking risk assessment. By the time the new campaign rolled out, the story had already leaked to corners of the internet that specialized in these intersections: race, work, surveillance, airports. The first clip the network ran was simple: her face in close-up, airport blurred behind her. Her name and title on the bottom: Amara Cole, tarot reader. Underneath, another line: profiled at this airport, back as a guide. Then other faces, other titles: flight attendant, janitor, frequent traveler, analyst. The airport screens, which once played nothing but luggage and luxury cards, now carried her features several times an hour, in security lines, at boarding gates, over food court tables, in the quiet corners where people repacked bags after additional screening. Every time one of the officers walked a shift, her face appeared above their heads in cycles. Not angry, not snarling, just steady. She spoke, in captions, about what it meant to live in a body some systems treated as a pre-existing suspicion. She did not mention them. She did not have to. She was on the training screens, too. That part they never advertised. The airport authority, under pressure from the travel company and from their own PR advisors, updated its bias training modules for security staff. The new course included a case study, anonymized but obvious to anyone who worked that day. A black tarot reader removed from the curb while her face simultaneously aired across the terminal as part of a corporate campaign. The training asked officers to consider why they had read her as scammer and not partner. What cues in their minds turned brown skin and non-traditional work into threat. Her image appeared at the beginning and end of the module, repeating the same line they had lifted from her talk. That intuition without accountability was just prejudice dressed up as a gut feeling. She had not designed the course. She had not sat in the back of the training room watching them watch her. But she knew about it. The travel company sent her a clipping from the internal memo. Her lawyer forwarded a PDF of the slide deck. She stared at the images for a long time, feeling something deep and complicated rise in her chest. Her grandmother would have called it justice. Her mother would have called it survival. She thought of it simply as proof. Proof that what had happened to her did not vanish into the gap between cameras and memory. Proof that the next time an officer felt that familiar itch to mock a black woman earning money in a way he did not understand, there might be a clip in his head of her face on a dozen screens, reminding him that the world watched him too. The next time she read for someone between flights, she did it inside the terminal. They had offered her a branded booth, glossy banners, maybe even a sponsor logo. She refused. She asked for a small table near the quietest part of the concourse, where people could sit without feeling like part of a spectacle. She put up the same simple sign as always: tarot, donations. Travelers recognized her now, some from the summit, some from the campaign, some only from a glimpse during boarding. A few told her they had seen the clip about what happened on the curb. They sat down, placed their palms on the table, and let her shuffle. When she laid out cards about fear and departure and the weight of being watched, the airport itself seemed to listen. Everywhere she turned, her own image watched back, not as accusation, not as decoration, but as a reminder. On gate screens, above security, in the training rooms officers pass through once a year, her face, the same one two men had mocked as scammer, now part of the architecture. The tarot never promised her revenge. It had taught her something quieter and, in its own way, sharper. Cycles end when someone refuses to repeat their role in them. She still carried the memory of that morning like a stone in her pocket. But now, when she pressed her fingers to it, she did not feel only humiliation. She felt the hum of the airport around her, the hum of engines and footsteps and rolling suitcases moving past screens where her face appeared again and again. The house of cameras had watched her, and in the end, it had done something it had never been designed to do. It bore witness.